Hello and welcome to BOI Weekly. I'm Kayode Alayande. Recently, the Kaduna State Government held the second economic summit called the Kaduna Investment Forum 2.0. For the Kaduna State Government, this was an avenue for investors and donors to interact with top government officials and entrepreneurs in the state so that investor and donor funds can be used to lubricate viable priority sectors that will ultimately deliver the desired impact on job creation and social development. During one of the sessions, some ministers and the acting MD CEO, Bank of Industry, as well as other experts, discussed how Kaduna State and entrepreneurs there can access development finance. We have all the details in just a moment. Stay close.
The agricultural sector.
Kaduna children.
It's day 2 of the Kaduna Investment Forum. All conversations so far have centered around the various ways the government of Kaduna State and the businesses there can attract both local and international investment and finance.
Our goal is to make Kaduna great again, and as the governor always says,
this panel is not an exception. It's looking at ways to address the infrastructural deficit in the state and by extension Nigeria. Opening the conversation, Honorable Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Hajia Zainab Ahmed, speaks about the all-inclusive nature of the newly launched Economic Recovery Growth Plan that involves bridging Nigeria's $30 trillion infrastructural deficit.
It is a national plan that we sought and harvested inputs from the states, from the National Assembly, from development partners, from the private sector, as well as from the public and civil society. So it is a plan for the nation. It's not a plan for the federal government. This plan is focused on returning Nigeria to the path of growth. We are aiming to achieve growth of 7% by the year 2020. And it has some key strategic initiatives, which includes stabilizing the macroeconomic environment by aligning fiscal policy, monetary policy, and trade policy. It also has some key priority initiatives that includes food security using the agricultural transformation agenda, which we are striving to mobilize, just like is being done in this forum today, the growth of industry driven by the small, medium, and small, medium enterprises, so that the concentration is not just on big businesses. We want to ensure that growth is inclusive, that nobody is left behind.
The acting MD CEO, Bank of Industry, Mr. Wahid Olagunju, was asked to suggest ways the newly established Development Bank of Nigeria can address the issues confronting small and medium enterprises in the country. He says being able to mobilize suitable development finance under a two-tier structure as it currently exists under the CBN guideline is key.
we've been at it for the past 58 years because the Bank of Industry owes its origin to Icon Limited that was established in 1959 and reconstructed into the Nigerian Industrial Development Bank in 1964. And incidentally, in 1964, the International Finance Corporation actually handled that reconstruction, and IFC provided the first chief executive. And IFC is still with Nigeria today. As you can see, the country manager is also on this panel. The ADB too has also supported the Nigerian Industrial Development Bank and even the Bank of Industry till date in terms of mobilizing suitable financial resources to meet the development financing needs of the country. I underline suitable because we're talking of mobilizing funds from domestic and international sources, from the public and private sectors that will be useful to entrepreneurs in Nigeria and even public sector institutions. But to address your question, the Development Bank of Nigeria is a wholesale DFI. Sometimes in 2013, the central bank came up with guidelines for DFIs in Nigeria that provided for a two-tier structure. So there will be a wholesale DFI to mobilize suitable financial resources for all lending to MSMEs in the country through microfinance banks and through the retail DFIs. The Bank of Industry, under that framework, is a retail DFI, along with the Bank of Agriculture and the Federal Mortgage Bank, and indeed the Nigerian Export-Import Bank. So the launch of the DNB is a welcome development in the sense that their mandate will be to shop around for suitable financial resources that we can on-lend to MSMEs, and typically these are long-term financing. You know, they're talking about 10-year tenure and single-digit interest rates, because those financing is one of the most important factors of production, as we all know, and suitability is very, very important. Not market-driven money, because market money are usually short tenure and high interest rates, and entrepreneurs need long tenured and low interest funding, particularly at the launch of the Economic Recovery and Growth Program that has just been launched yesterday by the federal government of Nigeria. A lot of development financing will be required. We have a economy of GDP of 100 trillion, and the federal government budget is just 7 trillion, which shows that it's supposed to be a catalyst to mobilize resources from within and outside the country, as also from the private sector, to support our development aspirations as a country.
Speaking on the importance of a predictable policy environment and stable macroeconomic indices as a prerequisite for securing development funding, the country director, Africa Development Bank, Mr. Ibrahima Fall, says his organization is now paying attention to subnational funding, which Kaduna State would definitely benefit from as legislation permits.
As a bank in Nigeria specifically, I think we have been doing about $6 to $7 billion in terms of investment. About 50% of that is in the public sector and another 50% in the private sector. And specifically to subnational finance, 33% of the sovereign lending is going to be the subnational finance. We are very cautious of the need and the demands that the post-2015 development agenda places on states in particular, for example. And therefore, we are now focusing, most of our lending to states have been through the federal government because of legislation mostly, either as implementers or as direct loans. But we are now looking at subnational finance as a standalone project, of course, subject to government legislation as well at the federal level.
Responding to questions about why Kaduna State has not felt the impact of the Lighting Africa project, the country manager of International Finance Corporation, IFC, Eme Essien, highlights the importance of public-private partnership and the indices involved in the project, but promises that Kaduna State would soon benefit from the scheme.
We are focused on bringing the impact of development to the bottom of the pyramid. So it is a program that essentially will bring off-grid solutions, solar solutions, directly to households. Now, what we found, because we have rolled out Lighting Africa in a number of countries, is that it's very important to look at the entire ecosystem. So it's not enough just to engage with government. We also have to engage with manufacturers. We have to do a lot of work around consumer awareness. So it's very important to look at the entire ecosystem to ensure that every stakeholder understands what we're trying to do, and ultimately when the products are rolled out, there is high acceptance rates. There's also a standards component. So I can assure you that in the near future, the residents, the indigents of Kaduna State will feel the impact of the Lighting Africa program. But I wanted to make another reference as well, because you opened with the challenge of infrastructure, the infrastructure deficit that the country is facing. And one point I wanted to make in that regard, again, is around the need for partnership. And the subject of this panel is called Development Finance for Subnationals. And to that question, I want to say the answer is yes, absolutely. But what it will take, particularly in the Nigerian context where many states struggle to generate sufficient revenue, is a really strong focus on public-private partnerships. And so the more we can see state governments partnering with the private sector that are viable and are commercially acceptable, that is really where we're going to cross that gap. So at IFC, we're very heartened that at the federal level and at the state level, there's a recognition of the role of the private sector in order to bridge that infrastructure deficit. And the question now is, can we find and can we put in place innovative partnerships to make that happen?